Okay, Year 11. This is an example of a structure question from the GCSE English Paper 1. A lot of people have asked me what it should sound like. What I've used for this, it's freely available online, is the opening of the novel Dr Jekyll and Mr Hyde. There is a link there, I'll also put it in the description. You will get a question that will say you'll need to think about the whole of the source. How has the writer structured the text to engage and establish intrigue within the reader? Now, it will vary in the actual thing what they want you to focus on, but here the focus is intrigue. So I'm just going to read you through this example. This was one I did with a booster class, and I've highlighted some words and phrases that you could use to help you if you're stuck about how to write about structure. So you always start with the opening. The opening of the text, a really good way to open your answer. The opening of the text contains a description of Mr. Utterson, who is a lawyer, so I'm not done long fancy quotes, but I'm showing the information I found as stated in the first sentence. So that's just a really basic kind of look at the structure there. And then I need to develop it. This focuses the reader on intrigue because he is a lawyer who may have to deal with life-threatening matters. When the writer uses dialogue, so I'm actually going to highlight that because that's another technical term. When the writer uses dialogue, so anytime you see talking, put that in, as Mr. Utterson describes himself, he includes an allusion to the biblical character of Cain, a murderer. Combined with the fact he is a lawyer who deals with men who are going down in the world, this foreshadows the possibility of a crime later in the story, adding intrigue. So what I've done there is this. End of my paragraph, I've taken intrigue, which is what they want you to look for, and I've said it's there. So it just sticks you to the question. I'm going to use some other words for intrigue, like suspense and so on, just so that it's not the same all the time. But that's essential that you refer to the question regularly. The narrator is omniscient, okay? Revise the different types of narrator. Omniscient is a narrator who can see everything. They're basically the writer and they've made it up. The narrator is omniscient and therefore able to describe Mr. Utterson's friendships, which is the focus of the next paragraph. That's my other tip. Every paragraph say what the focus is, which is the focus of the next paragraph. Introducing a long-term friend, Mr. Enfield. A well-known man about town, he provides a contrast to the cold Mr. Utterson. Contrast is just a useful word whenever there's two different things. However, their friendship is described as growing slowly and strongly like ivy, which enables the creation of trust for Mr. Enfield. Now, the reason I've highlighted this is I've nominalised it to make it sound more formal. I could have said creates trust in Mr. Enfield's, but I've put enables the creation of trust. This is of importance because it is Mr. Enfield who later narrates the climax of the extract. So I'm showing that I'm referring to the whole thing and why it's important that we know we can trust Mr. Enfield. There is then a change in focus. Okay, if you take one thing from this video, take this. That is a great way to start a paragraph where there's a setting change or anything like that, because the word focus is in the mark scheme. There is then a change of focus. The writer leads the reader using the device of a ramble with the two characters to a thriving street. So what I've noticed here is that the writer uses the fact they're going for a walk to kind of lead us into the new setting. It's a method, it's a device. Yeah? Whenever you see a character getting on any kind of transport or going for a walk, it's leading the reader if you follow them, if you can see what they see. And therefore it's a device. So the writer leads the reader using the device of a ramble with the two characters to a thriving street. So again, quick quote there, nothing too complicated. Setting, I think this bit we wrote it on the board, so it's a bit, I think it should be the setting. The setting created a representation of positivity, profit and good cheer. The street has an air of invitation and freshly painted shutters. The paragraph closes by emphasising, so here again, I'm just talking about the opening and closing of paragraphs, but I'm talking about why they're done that way. The paragraph closes by emphasising how this setting pleased the eye, which sets up a juxtaposition with the next. The words contrast and juxtaposition, you can use either. Juxtaposition is slightly more advanced. The writer zooms in on one detail from the street. So here's where we get the contrast. They're zooming in, they're focusing in on one detail. A mysterious, sinister and intriguing house. Look, I've made sure I've used the word intriguing in every paragraph, or another word that means the same. The lack of windows, simply a discoloured wall, prompts the reader to imagine what is hidden, and mystery is prompted. Further contrast is created when the door is associated with tramps and other outsiders, and described by the omniscient narrator as neglected for a generation. So I've put lots of stuff there that's mysterious. I've used contrast, juxtaposition, omniscient narrator, paragraph closes by, change in focus, writer zooms in on one detail. But you'll notice that's not all I've written. All of this stuff not highlighted is what it makes the reader think and feel. So you have the technical device and you have what it makes the reader think and feel. Okay, so we haven't got to the end of the extract, because this is the bit the examiner probably really wants you to notice. There is then a change in the narrative voice. Okay, in this particular extract, the narrator suddenly kind of has Mr. Enfield tell the story himself. So there's a change in narrator. If that's there, they want you to see it. So it starts out with somebody like the writer writing the story, and suddenly it changes to Mr. Enfield saying, oh, let me tell you a story. And there's always one reason for this. It always invites the reader closer to the action. It always kind of lets you hear from within the character, which makes things more dramatic. So whenever you see that, talk about it bringing the reader closer to the action, more dramatic, you can get their thoughts and feelings. So there is then a change in the narrative voice. The story is told by Mr. Enfield. This invites the reader closer to the action as we hear the protagonist's story and thoughts in the first person. Okay, some more technical language there, first person. He introduces his narrative as a very odd story, prompting the reader to be intrigued. Again, never a paragraph where I haven't said anything about intrigue, as to what is odd. Furthermore, his narrative is set at night, street after street, and all the folks asleep, street after street, creating a lonely, mysterious atmosphere in complete contrast to the thriving street by day. This pathetic fallacy leads the reader to another contrast, an adult man and a child. So there's loads of contrast in this story, so I keep mentioning it. Within the eerie setting is also structure, the description of them colliding is then emphasised by the word horrible. The sound of the child screaming as the man calmly treads on her both puzzles and upsets the reader, as they are left wondering whether she survives. The writer then refocuses the reader on visualising the event. If they ever tell you to listen or look, use this phrase. The writer then refocuses the reader on visualising or listening to, or even smelling if they ask you to imagine the smell. If they ask you to use a sense, mention it. The writer then refocuses the reader on visualising, so seeing the event. It sounds nothing to hear, but it was hellish to see. Thus they experience both senses clearly and disturbingly, one after the other. Okay, so things to notice there is I've noticed where the writer has talked about using a certain sense, and I've noticed loads of contrasts. They keep happening. There's lots and lots, which makes it disturbing and spooky. Following this climax, the resolution of the narrative is not complete but creates further questions. Okay, so I've noticed that there's a climax. This is a part of a story, the most dramatic bit of a story. Well, that was the most dramatic bit of the story. Yeah, this guy came and trampled on a child and left them injured in the street. The resolution at the end of this extract, they do actually catch the man. So that's the resolution, but it's not complete. It still leaves you wondering. So I've mentioned that. Following this climax, the resolution of the narrative is not complete, but creates further questions. The focus is the interaction between the man and those who apprehend him. So I'm talking about character here, but how they interact. And I'm always talking about the focus. First, he is apprehended without resistance, but gives a look so ugly that it terrifies Enfield. This seems bizarre to the reader. So I've got sick of writing intrigue, and I've written bizarre. It means the same thing. Puzzles the reader, draws them in. This seems bizarre to the reader, who, having had their intrigue, I didn't get that sick of writing intrigue, about the fate of the girl satisfied positively, are led to watch as first the family, then the Sawbones, who is as emotional as a set of bagpipes, experience loathing of the man. His aura and a moment of empathy between Enfield and the doctor regarding their desire to kill him creates a cliffhanger to close the narrative. If they ever give you anything with a mysterious bit at the ending in your exam, that's an absolute gift. It's a cliffhanger. Yeah. If they ever give you something that's all really neatly tied up, like from the end of a novel, then you can say it's a satisfactory resolution. There's lots of things in between, but a cliffhanger on the one hand, satisfactory resolution on the other, you can talk about that. We want intrigue. So intrigue is wondering what's going to happen next, what's weird. So we like the fact there's a cliffhanger. They silently resolved to do the next best. Okay, so that was the last bit of the extract. And you're like, well, what is the next best? They want to kill him. What's the next best thing? And in this revision session, we asked around what could possibly happen. So that's how we imagined. You wouldn't have that in the exam, but that's how we imagined what the reader would do. We literally asked each other, what do you think might happen next? And we came out with intrigue is created as the reader wonders what this is. What is this next best? And furthermore, as they think back to the introduction, could it involve the law in some way, and therefore possibly Mr. Utterson? My final trick, particularly if you're looking for higher grades, is when you get right to the end, cast your mind back to the start. Is there any sign of a cycle? Is there any contrast between beginning and end? Is there any link you can make? Here we've got Mr. Utterson that deals with criminals. Somebody has just stamped all over a child and everyone hates him. You could then be thinking, well, he's committed a crime. Will the next bit of the story be to do with Mr. Utterson? Or maybe this next best is they're going to beat him up and they're the criminals. I don't know. You know, I would say probably not, because Mr. Enfield is a friend of Mr. Utterson's. But when I asked around the group, a lot of people said, well, they're probably going to get him arrested, because in those days people would get executed. And he might come across Mr. Utterson. Okay, if you want to work along with this example, I will put the link in the description box to the opening of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It would also be useful for you to use your mark scheme. I'm sure you've got one in your book, or get the sample one of AQA, and have a look. Put in the comments below, what grade would you give this? Would you give it full marks or not? It's a real one that we've worked together on, lots of different students. What would you give it? Okay, so leave a comment. Don't forget to subscribe and like this video, and also leave me a comment if there's anything else you want. Good luck. Thank you for watching.